I'm Doug Thompson. Welcome to this edition of Legislative Updates with John Barker of the Kansas House of Representatives for the 70th District. Most of us get our information concerning the actions of the Kansas Legislature either from some form of media or after the fact, as the legislation either became law or died during the process. Representative John Barker has graciously agreed to take time from his schedule to update pending legislation as the bills are moving through committee to consideration by the House of Representatives. Right after this short break, let's talk with Representative John Barker concerning this week in the Kansas Legislature. Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, John Barker. And John's a member of the Legislature and Kansas House of Representatives, 70th District, working on his third term, and working would be the right term. You have been extremely busy.
It has been a busy session. Of course, the last week and a half, we're getting close to turnaround, which was yesterday. And so,
when you say turnaround, what's that mean?
Okay, we have cutoff limits in the legislature, bill introductions, committee bill introductions, when you can, cutoff dates that a member can enter a new bill up to the cutoff date, and the committees, non-exempt committees, can enter it at a certain date. And then all those bills that are kicked out of committees, the last 3 or 4 days, we're on the floor of the House debating those bills. And if they don't pass out, well, by yesterday, which was turned down, then they're dead for the year. Unless the Speaker, of course, wants to bless one of those bills. And when I say bless, it's a term we use. It means it has to go to a non-exempt committee like Appropriations, Tax, or to Fed and State, my committee. And then we keep them for a day and then send them back to that committee. And then you can work those bills all the way until the end of the session.
Okay, and so the cutoff then becomes at the end of that session. Then that's the cutoff. You can't submit any more bills.
That is correct.
In that method.
That is correct. It ended yesterday when we closed the doors at about 4 o'clock yesterday after. The night before we went till 9:30, I think, trying to get those bills worked. And now we have 4 or 5 days off, and the break is the Senate will now send all the bills that they have passed over to the House, and all the House bills that have been passed by the entire chamber is sent to the Senate. And then we take 3 or 4 days off while the staff set those up in the computers, so that when we come back, all the non-exempt committees will be working Senate bills, and all the Senate non-exempt committees will be working House bills.
So that's where the term comes in about turnaround.
Turnaround.
So you're taking the Senate bills coming in and processing those through. Do they go into committees?
They will go into those respective committees. And then, for example, if it come over from Ways and Means, well, Ways and Means is a bad example, that's an exempt committee, but like Health, from the Senate, then those passed out by the Senate Health Committee, and the Senate will then go to the House Health Committee, and then if they pass them out or amend them, then they'll come to the Senate floor, to the House floor, and we will debate them and either pass them or amend them and pass them. But this is day 45, this is halfway, and that's the reason we call it turnaround. So when we go back, those committees will be working Senate bills, and they'll be working House bills.
Well, that would make sense. I think you told us before on Legislative Updates that if it comes into the House and you make changes, meaning amendments to it, goes back over to the Senate, and then they not necessarily start over, or maybe they do start over.
Well, if we would amend a Senate bill, then it would be sent back to the Senate, and they would either concur or non-concur. If they concur, they've accepted our amendments, and the bill is passed. If they non-concur, then they would ask for a conference committee to be appointed, and a conference committee would be the chairman, vice chairman, and ranking member of each of those committees on the House side and the Senate side, 6 members. And then they would discuss the changes and then come out with, if they agreed to something, it would come out in a conference committee report. And then each side would run those on their respective floors.
Okay. This is a lot like Australian rugby, isn't it?
If you know
there's a lot of rules.
You need to know the rules.
Yeah, that always is the best way to go
And as
around.
a former rules chair, that was the first thing. Well, in court, if you know the rules, it helps.
Yeah, it does. You can navigate in there a lot better and more effectively.
And as a former rules chair, I've made a point to learn the rules and to make different vehicles, and there's a number of terms that we use within the body to get certain things done.
I want to go into something, John, before we go into these some of the bills that are working its way through. But I read in the press in here about, well, we're into this situation. There's money needed. The legislature's come up with some budget figures. The governor says not going to happen, going to veto it. Give me your take on what's going on there.
Well, the Senate sent, the governor sent his budget in. Our budget committee in the House is chaired by Steve. Just lost his name here. Johnson from Assyria, and his committee kicked out a bill. It was passed on the floor. It went to the Senate. It was passed, and then the governor vetoed it, and so that makes a 2/3 vote on each body. The House overrode the veto. The Senate did not, so that bill is now dead. As of yesterday, Steve Johnson sits right beside of me, and we introduced 3 more bills, 3 more appropriations bills. And so that's kind of where we're at right now with the appropriations.
All right, we're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates with John Barker. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my guest, John Barker. We were just talking about the budget that went up to the governor and then was vetoed, and now that one is dead.
Right.
I guess reading the papers from the outside and not knowing you, then I would be concerned about, well, where is the state with all of this? Because I hear stories that we need this much money and we're this much short. And so you hear taxpayers saying, oh, the legislature needs to just fund that. But then, you know, when I hear those things, I say, where do you guys think the money comes from? Well, it comes from the taxpayers, is what you've told me multiple times.
True.
And so, you know, the taxpayers start, well, wait a minute now, I never started thinking about that. I just thought it came from somebody else's pocket.
All right.
So how does this play out? Because you've told me before, and I know this, the school funding hasn't even come up yet.
Exactly.
And that'll probably be a pretty big issue. And then last time when we talked, we had Representative Dan Hawkins was here with you, and he was talking about on the Medicaid
expansion.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's true. I mean, what's the old saying? The best tax is the tax that somebody else pays.
Yeah.
So I'll let you pay it.
Yeah.
No, seriously, with the appropriations and the tax bill that came out that the governor vetoed, the Senate didn't override the veto. Yesterday, Steve Johnson's committee introduced 3 new tax bills. One of them is the governor's tax bill. One of them is the tax bill that was just vetoed without going back to January, starting effective the date the governor would sign it. And a third tax bill, the one I asked him for, which was the tax on LLCs and sub-S's. So those 3 bills were introduced yesterday. I would imagine when we come back, he'll be having hearings on them. What we would like to do and what we normally do in this case, because this last tax bill was a little premature. You need to know what you're spending before you come back in and pay the bill. So he'll probably have hearings on those 3 bills. If one of them passes the House, if it would go to the Senate, I would imagine the Senate will amend it or change it, send it back to us, then put those bills, or at least one, hopefully, in conference. And as long as it's in conference, it's negotiable. And then the negotiations take place between the House and the Senate. And they may change. And at that time, the administration, the governor's office may want to weigh in a little bit, so that we get a bill that comes out that passes both the House, the Senate, and the governor agrees to sign.
Okay.
So that's basically about the budget. As far as the Medicaid expansion, which was the last, with Dan Hawkins was here.
By the way, I read in the paper that you killed that bill.
I know. True? You did read that. I read that as soon as I came home today. I read it in the Reflector Chronicle. It's untrue. But people don't understand the process. What I did in committee, I made a motion to table it. To make a motion to table is a non-debatable motion. Majority members of the committee agreed with me because my argument was this. It's going to cost $50-some million, 53. We don't have school finance. The big elephant in the room is school finance. We don't know what that's going to be. I thought it was premature. I asked to set it for the 3rd of April because I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will come out with the decision prior to that. And then we will look at the entire appropriations package. If it has school finance, if it has Medicaid expansion or any other spending items that may have been approved by then. Then we can look at the entire, if we need to cut, we'll cut. If we need to approve it, then we have to come up with a tax bill that will pay for it. You know, I don't mind spending money, but whatever we spend, we've got to pay for. And we need to know what we're going to spend before we have a tax bill.
Sure, that makes sense. And so you didn't kill anything. What you did was just said, let's just put it on hold till we see the other expenditures.
Right. And in fact, the Democrats didn't like that. The minority leader, Representative Ward, brought him what we call a introduction of motions the first day, which in my years at the legislature, first time I've ever seen it. And it's a motion, an original motion that has to be set for 24 hours, and the next day you have to vote. It has to be 70 or more, and then he could bring that bill that was tabled by me out of committee and then run it on the floor. There was an agreement struck between him and the speaker that they would bring another bill out, and he would withdraw his motion and bring another bill out that was a germane to Medicaid expansion. We had a 4-hour debate on the Medicaid expansion. It did pass, and so if it was dead, it surprises me because it passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it goes to the Senate.
I understand.
Right.
Now, when you talked about like bills and bill brief, what is a bill brief?
For every committee that passes out a bill, it is the responsibility of the chairman to assign the vice chairman to do the bill brief, and then it has to be approved by the chairman. And it's basically, I have one here, and I think it maybe show it up later. It just talks about the author of the bill brief, which whoever wrote it was usually normally the vice chair, sponsored by what committee. Then it talks about the reporting committee, which would be in this case the judiciary. The bill concerns, like this, was creating an exception to the Kansas Open Records Act for juror list, and then what the bill does. And then you have another part of it, which is political reality, committee amendments, if any were introduced, possible floor amendments on the floor that you could anticipate, the proponents to the bill, the people who came in and testified for it, opponents who testified against it, if it has any financial impact on the state budget, and then you also assign one of the members of the committee to carry the bill on the floor. And you also, the last one is the bill ready to be run on the floor? And you do this. I did one on our gaming bill. It's 10 pages. It's going to take a while, but normally the simple bills, it's 1 or 2 pages.
Okay, and there's one up on the screen right now that the folks can take a look at and see. And would this be somewhat similar to what we would say, well, this is like a docket sheet in the court system that's following it, leading it?
It helps, and it also explains the bill, so every member gets a copy of it, so they'll be able to read it and understand the bill better. And then the minority party also prepares a bill brief from their perspective.
Got it.
Got
it. All right. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates with John Barker. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with guest John Barker. And John, you're, of course, the district representative for the 70th district, and you've been working on bills in the legislature. What do you want to go over to share with the folks that are watching right now?
The last few days, you know, because we were on the floor all day from 9 in the morning, well, we really meet at 8 to do what we call caucus. The Republicans come together and we explain each carrier of a bill, which is from the bill brief, then explains it, and if we have any questions about it, they need to answer our questions, and then from there, we go to the floor of the House. A week and a half ago, I was privileged to chair the Committee of the Whole. They normally, when we go to Committee of the Whole, we resolve ourselves from the House of Representatives to the Committee of the Whole, same amount of people, except the Speaker doesn't sit in the chair. He appoints someone to sit as Committee of the Whole chair, and usually because that's when we debate bills. And we had an appropriations bill and a rescission bill. Speaker had called me the night before and asked me if I would chair it. He said, you know, you'll probably be in the chair for 6 or 7 hours. This is, appropriations bills get to be that way. And I said, sure, I'll chair it. I've chaired it before. And it is a lot of amendments being offered, so it's a long, fortunately for me though, we were in and out in an hour.
Wow.
Which is very unusual, maybe an hour and a half, but it was a short period of time. Of course, I always enjoy chairing the Committee of the Whole. But we've had a number of bills. I think in the last 2 days we've probably done, I think it was like 40 bills.
That's a lot of bills.
But most of these bills are non-controversial. It's, you know, you work together with your counterparts. Give you an example. We had a judiciary bill creating exceptions to the open record. In fact, it was that bill brief there that I showed you earlier, passed 125 to 0. We had a license renewal of treatment centers, passed 125 to 0. We had a transportation providing income tax credits for the aerospace industry, which is in Wichita. A little bit more controversial. It was 80 to 42. Allowing probation revocation within graduated sanctions for the judiciary. It passed 125. Water and environment, this bill passed 122 to 0. Had a children's and seniors bill, amending individual development accounts programs acts to allow certain expenditures by individuals who are likely to age out of foster care, passed 125.
And there's 125 in the House.
125. Another judiciary bill relating to the custody and disposition of cruelty treated animals, 124 to 1. Restrictions on persons interacting with child care facilities, restrictions on persons, you know, going into those facilities. You don't want to know who's going into those types of facilities. It passed 125 to 1. Creating the seatbelt safety fund and increasing fines for adult seatbelt violation, passed 106. It had 106 votes. Providing for the autism awareness distinctive license plate, 120. Designated segment of the United States Highway 75 as a part of Sergeant Melton K. Miller Memorial Highway, passed 125. So, I mean, most of these bills are non-controversial.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But they do take time. The one bill that I found was interesting was, you know, I'm no medical professional of any type, but I am on health, and we had biosimilars, Doug.
Biosimilars. What's that mean?
Well, I thought you'd know.
Well, I can break the two terms down and
Right.
probably make a pretty good guess
You
at
could.
it, but what happened? What was it about?
Generic drugs.
Okay.
Like you go get an antibiotic and they give a prescription. The pharmacist has the right, or can, without doctor's authority, change that to a generic.
Cheaper.
Cheaper. And a lot of insurance companies like for them to do that. Biosimilars is not a compound drug, but it's an injectable drug. And it's grown through, and this is far beyond my basic biology, but it's grown with certain, like we grow, I guess, a lot of other things, I don't know, in the medical field. But it's not exact. It's not exact. The proteins are a little different. But it's the coming thing, and they're injectables, and they're usually used for cancer patients and people with major diseases. So we had a Dr. Lakin, who's a representative Lakin. On my health committee, I have 3 doctors. I have Dr. Lakin, I have Dr. Espy, and Dr. Rashi. One's a radiologist, 2 of them are MDs. I guess the radiologist is an MD too. And they think this is the sign of the future because, 1, it can save money. 2, the FDA must approve their use before a pharmacist can switch and change those to a biosimilar, like they would a generic. So, but they tell me there's only 4 presently accepted by the FDA. But in the future, there's a number of other drugs that could be used for cancer treatment.
And again, at a cost savings,
At a
not only
cost
to the customer, but to the customer, but also to the insurance company.
Exactly.
Okay. And yet it is so close that it's not an exact, so it doesn't fit that term.
Right. And
Got
before,
it. That makes sense.
And before, pharmacists couldn't interchange those. This would allow the pharmacist to change that if it's been approved by the FDA, Federal Drug Administration.
Okay. All right.
So.
All right. What do you have coming up that's going to be the big fighting stick here that's going to be coming up? You got something working its way through that you said is 125, so you know it's going to be a 63, 62.
Well, that's probably going to be a tax bill or an appropriations bill or a gun bill.
Gun bill, what's coming up in regards to the gun bill?
Well,
maybe nothing introduced, but you're anticipating that that's going to
I
be...
have several in committee.
Okay.
And they're controversial. You know, you have the Second Amendment carry that was passed a few years ago. And of course, 1 July is when that becomes effective. So people without a permit will be able to carry a concealed gun on campus, at college campuses, or in hospitals, or in nursing homes, or in mental health clinics.
What about the courtrooms?
We've got that taken care of.
Okay, all right.
We've got that taken care of. The court has that authority.
And that's good. We got to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with guest John Barker. And John, we were talking about, the school finances probably, as you've used the term, and I'm sure it's accurate, that is the elephant in the room. Because would I be right that once that figure is known and accepted, then everything else begins to fit together around it?
Correct. I think the Supreme Court took the oral arguments in October, November of last year. We're hoping for a decision. I was hoping for a decision prior to the start of the legislature so that you can prepare for it and start working bills. We've got our budget committee, our educational budget committee, working on a new formula. So we would like to get that decision out as soon as possible. Hopefully it will come out next Friday, but it's up to the court.
Wow. Stay tuned, because legislative updates every week, every time we do this, is going to be very interesting. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.